When it comes to discussing the mesh tools Dice and Twist, these two actually almost go together, except they do not. Dice is our system of adding loop cuts where loop cuts cannot exist. For example, if we go into edit mode, we have this cube, and if I press Ctrl R, we can add a loop cut. Now roll the wheel, I can add more loop cuts, and we can add loop cuts here, we can add loop cuts here, and we can add loop cuts because there's a flow happening on this mesh. But if we were to say, we'll turn on wireframe, but let's say that we were to go under operations and perform a clean mesh to just clean all the degenerative geometry off, and we go into edit mode and we perform booleans, we aren't able to have a flow anymore. In fact, we're not going to be able to create very much edge geometry on this, which is going to limit our ability to create deformation and have this mesh actually deform and become what we want it to be. So here we are just setting up some differences, and now I'm just going to go through and try to add some loop cuts, and you see that I'm able to add a loop cut to this face, but it ends here because it's an end gun. It disconnects and will not continue across. And this has always been something that's kind of pestered me about booleans and hard surface. So for that reason, Dice exists. So in order to set up this example, we'll press Alt X, and I will actually change this to be basically mod and apply to just mirror it over and just be done. So there, now we're done. We've mirrored it and we're finished. And I'm actually going to dissolve this loop in the middle just for sanity's sake. And if we wanted to force some geometry on this, this is where Dice would come in. So when you bring up Dice, just moving it changes the axis that it's going to be showing, and it will always be showing the original object at this time until Dice receives its next promotion, which I have planned in the works. But for now, basically, once you have Dice where you want, by clicking it, it will perform an operation allowing you to basically dice through this object. And by dicing through it, we're now able to deform it a lot more readily. Before, since the geometry is relatively simple and planar, we weren't able to do much with it. But now we can actually follow it up with Twist 360, which at this time didn't come in the most properly. But that's because we're looking at it on the y-axis. So if we press X to change the axis, we can change the rotation, but we actually want to rotate it. So pressing R will give us the result that we want. And we actually want to look at the inside on the outside. So we'll press F to flip it. And so now we see that we were able to create this Boolean mesh, but we were also able to twist and deform it very easily because, when it comes to deforming and twisting anything, it's just a matter of having adequate geometry on the mesh in order to help it go around. For these edges that you see in the middle between every section, that is as a result of the shading, but it's also as a result of the interior faces. So now that there's no interior faces, now we have a smooth continuous model, and we can actually go ahead and bevel this and get the shape that we want. However, we do see that there's some issues occurring. So when it comes to actually fixing that, let's toggle our modifiers off for now. So we'll just toggle off everything, and let's look at this area that was having so much trouble. It's almost hard to tell which area it is, except I think it's this area. And it is. So from the looks of it, it looks like the bevel's just not having a good day here. So the easiest way to troubleshoot would be to press Alt V and go under face orientation, where we can see that all these faces are red, letting us know that if we go in edit mode and press Shift N, the faces are normal. And we come back out into object mode, the results are a little bit more acceptable. And by a little bit more, I mean almost there. We just need to grab this single face and move it over and maybe re-mirror this to the other side, and then we can come out and actually see this looking the way it's supposed to look. So what if we wanted to dice it the other way? Well, we can still do that, because with dice you can force any sort of edge flow basically on your geometry. So we'll move this to here, and now we've actually diced it going this way, which means that we can do something like, say, lattice, and let's turn off face orientation for this. But now we can actually lattice, grab these 4 points, deform it in object mode, use the Q menu to add an additional span, grab these 4, scale them out, and just create these really unique, interesting shapes very quickly and still have an interactive bevel. But when it comes to bevel, you have to be mindful of how it interacts with the surfaces, because if not, you are definitely in for a bad time. And then of course on top of this, we can slap it with the decimate to just clean off the top and bottom and linearize things to just get it a lot more simpler. but this is basically how you would use dice and twist kind of in a nutshell. And there's some creative uses that can be had with this. For example, I was showing previously how you could use dice with to shape to create objects that can have caps on a curve. And Twist 360 is a mainstay of hops and has finally, grown into its own. So I'm just proud to see that it's finally growing a little bit and gaining more utility compared to some of the other tools that are also receiving upgrades as well. But in a nutshell, dice and Twist 360 can be used interchangeably with each other to just enhance the experience. But dice just comes in handy for any time you need to force an edge loop on an area that normally would not take a Control R.